Hey everyone, I'm Eric. I'm a software engineer. Been doing that for about 14 years. I've been an Angular developer for 6 or 7 years. And today I would like to focus on, looks like any of these top three, most recent three issues here for my suite of open source libraries called slibs. And looks like we've got issues for two of them open, a couple for ngCore, one for ngDev. Um, excuse me. And these two I found today, um, earlier today when I was using these. And oh, I think I found this one. Looks like 3 days ago. That was during a stream. We filled this out. So um, so that's the plan. Just start going at these, trying to improve the libraries. Before I go do something sort of on top of them, before I go, there's a bunch of things I have in mind that I'd like to do, work on my Sudoku app and stuff like that, my weather app. But anyway, let's see here. I pulled this up, and it looks like I had left a note at the end of the last stream that I'm just going to convert into an item in my to-do list over here, so that we can come back to that some other time. Um, and for now, be able to just focus on those issues. That one of them in particular caused a bug when I upgraded slibs, and so I definitely want to get that one taken care of. So let's see here. Add support help for tag next to publish libs. And I'm just going to put this back. So let's pick one. This is the one that was causing problems. This is the most important thing I'd like to get figured out. So the bug here, we'll have to write a failing test for it, and that'll help explain the bug at the same time. What's going on here? Oh, yeah, that was left over from trying to deploy last time. Cool. So that was in ngDev. No, ngCore. This is real production code, and I think it was going to be in here. This guy. Yep. Let me just open the test for that and get that over here. Great. So the problem to solve is that in some version of ngCore, maybe one or two versions ago, I changed this up so that when you to make it behave a bit like a behavior subject. Um, so in the past, you subscribe to get input. Oh well, first of all, what does this do? It's an observable of the values for one of this directive's input properties. So this class is meant to just be a superclass for directives, Angular directives that you write, if you want any of this functionality added to your directive, such as taking any input from your component and turning it and getting an observable of it. So anytime that input changes, it emits a new value to this observable. And so this is just, it's like ng on changes, but it just gives you another option. So it's ready to go to pipe through some observable operators and stuff like that. So if you're used to using RxJS, this might be a more convenient way for you to deal with the input values in your component. And so the couple of versions back, it looked like this, and you could subscribe to this guy, but then you wouldn't get the current value of the input. It would only emit at the next time the input changed. And so I added this guy here to make it more like a behavior subject. So as soon as you subscribe, you're going to get the current value, and then also each change in the future. However, the problem I found today, as I was upgrading in one of my projects actually at my day job, was that if you subscribe in the constructor, you get undefined right away because Angular hasn't even populated those inputs yet. So if you subscribe that soon, I want it to wait. I do not want it to emit yet until ng-on-changes runs the first time. Then after that, I want it to be like a behavior subject. And I made a quick hacky implementation of it at work just to be able to move on. So maybe we'll write a failing test. I'll do the quick hacky implementation to get the test passing, and then we can stop and think about how to do it more elegantly or something. Excuse me. All right. So it does not emit until the first ng-on-changes. Basically, that's all I'm really trying to do. And how can we test this? So the way these tests work, we have our context here, which constructs one of these test components. And so the test component, we're going to need a constructor. Here, we can maybe use this somehow. We need some component that's going to have, let me just expand all this. Some component that's going to subscribe to that get input in its constructor. So then that's going to be the exact situation that I ran into earlier today and was causing bugs. And then some way to like reproduce, observe whether or not it was doing that. Maybe even have it throw an error. Some situation where that throws an error. Interesting. Oh, look right here. We're doing get input in a constructor. Interesting. We could keep a log of the values somehow, somewhere, and then inspect that log in the test and see that it started with the value we passed in rather than starting with undefined and then going to the value we passed in, because that's the behavior right now. This behaves like a behavior subject. Looks like we don't have any inputs on the test component itself, so we should focus here and do something on this, or make our own component just for this test, which might even be nicer. When I start writing a spec, a whole test file, it's so tempting to just sort of make a couple of components like this. If you have to use a component in your test, it's really tempting to make a couple components like this and just add on to them for this and that little test case. But then that's kind of unsustainable. If as this file grows, all of a sudden these components end up with probably like what we have here. We probably see the fallout of that in front of us, where it has 3 inputs and an extra thing you inject and all this crazy stuff going on. And I don't really want to add more and more to that. So let's just make up our own brand new I don't know, component to play with for this. So we'll want a component that has an input, subscribes to it in the constructor, And then do we want to keep a log of it, or do we want it to, I think a log of it would be the most clear. We could have it do something with that input in a way that throws an exception if it's undefined. But that feels, it feels like we're gonna end up with a more like readable, like when you go back and look at the test, it'll be more obvious exactly the case we're trying to test if we just look at the log and say we didn't want undefined there. And yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Let's start with a component. So it's going to need a template, and let's just have it be blank to start. I don't actually know if we'll need a template for sure. And then test. Test component is going to override. Yeah, I need to work on I need to make a habit of not putting these up at the top like that. Because now I have to come up with a whole new name here. That's a lesson I should learn. So we're going to need an input, and that'll be, I don't know, I'm just going to make up really dumb names to start with, and then maybe we'll sense a theme and give it better names in a minute. And we'll just make it a string. Why not? We could make it like a hello world log. And then let's make a, we're obviously going to need a constructor, and we're going to need to do this dot get. Oh, so this is going to have to extends directive superclass so that we can do this dot get input, my input. And then what should we do with it? What should we do with it? We could subscribe to it and add it to a log. But you know what? We're going to end up with less test code. If we'll still subscribe to it. Subscribe to this. And we'll do if there's no input, throw new error, this input is required. Or I should do something more specific to this test. It's not like I'm trying to make a nice component that feels realistic. I'm just like that you would actually put in some weird app somewhere. All I need to do is make it really clear what we're testing. So if there's no input, throw new error, subscribed too early. That's really what we're testing. Oh, we're going to have to call super dot, oh no, just super. And what does this take? An injector, I think. And this is just sort of boilerplate if you extend this superclass. All right, and then let's do test context to extends. Oh, this is a class. Component context, where the component type is test component to. I'm gonna try and think about better names for those in a minute. And then, this just keeps propagating. CTX2 is a new test context 2. And so we're going to run in test context 2. Let's just get that to run. Let's see, we're in ng core. Let's fire up the test server. And I think this is already going to throw an error. It'll be red, we'll turn it green, and then we'll go try and refactor everything. Both the test itself, Test the self and the production code, or should we get the test refactored before we fix the production code? That's an interesting philosophy of TDD thought. All right, well, while that's firing up, let's make sure we get to this guy. Subscribed too early? Look at that. So really, we can do, I'm going to refactor the test first. Let me pause and tell you and think about that some more and make sure that really makes sense. In TDD, the reason I like TDD, test-driven development, is this red-green refactor cycle where first you write a failing test for like the next smallest possible set of functionality you could add to your production code. A failing test. Then you go and write the little piece of production code to make it pass, to make it turn green. And then you do the fastest, hackiest thing possible to make it turn green. And then you think about, do I want to refactor this and make it prettier and make it nice? Because I know I can fall into the trap of, as soon as I want to sort of repeat, like in my production code, if if the simplest, fastest, hackiest thing to turn it green might be to copy some code from here, paste it there, and turn it green. And that's great. That's part of the process. Because then, rather than spending much of time taking this code out from above and making it reusable, and then writing your code to turn it green, you might have made a mistake in that refactor, or you might have made a mistake in the way you used it, and your test is still red. You don't know which, you've done more stuff. You don't know exactly where to go look and find your mistake. If you do teeny steps, then as soon as the tests turn red, it should be really obvious what you did wrong, or it should be at least a lot narrow down where you have to look a lot more. So anyway, how did I get off on that? I was going to think through why I want to refactor my test before I turn it green. I guess because if I turn it green and then I refactor my test and it's still green, how do I know if the test is still working at all, or if the test just always passes no matter what the production behavior is? So I feel like I want to get my test all set up and then have like the big moment of turning it green. And the great part there is it proves that your test works. Not just that it passes, but that it will also fail if the production behavior is wrong. Right? So if you see both the red and the green of the test, depending on the production behavior, then you know your test is working correctly. Okay. Anyway, enough talk of philosophy. Let's just do it. So that's why I wanted to do something like expect. I'm going to refactor the test first, not to throw error. Now, I mean, it's sort of, the test was already red, but if I look at this and I say expect nothing, when I'm trying to read this test later, I'm like, expect nothing, so what's the point? What is the actual expectation? It is hidden. But if I actually add this in there, now I've made it explicit. No, I don't want RxJS no op. I want microdash no op. Oops. No op. What? Where did that just come from? I want to import this. Oh, it is from microdash. Oh, okay. I don't know why the import said RxJS, but it looks like it's okay. So the component throws an error on init if the observable emits too soon. Cool. The test component. And so that's a lot of setup code. Oh, I've had in the back of my mind, I've had in the back of my mind to write some more helpers to simplify some of this. It's a lot. I mean, it's not exactly boilerplate. Maybe, this kind of is. I could easily write. In fact, I could change up component context to take the component in its constructor instead of as a variable like this and make it a concrete class, not even abstract. And that would go a long way for these simple tests. And that's something I should definitely do. Let me at least write an issue for that. I don't want to do it right now because that would be a breaking change. And so I'm going to do that maybe before the next major version bump. ngCore improve allow using component context without creating a subclass. Take the component class in the constructor instead of requiring it to be instead of as an abstract instance variable. Yeah, because right now, what? Find usages. No, I was trying to go to, oh, here, I can just push this button. Yeah, like right now it's abstract in the component context. And let me just take one more minute and make sure that's going to be, like there's not some reason I had to do it this way. When's the first time I actually use it? It's in init, which is after the constructor's been called. So there would be no reason we couldn't do it that way. So yeah, I'm going to leave this as a future improvement. What else could we do that wouldn't require rewriting test helpers to simplify this guy? I mean, it'd be great if I didn't have to put this letter 2 all over, character 2 all over the place. But that's something I'm not ready to tackle right now. Okay, I'll leave that as is. Someday maybe I'll come in here and do like I was saying, follow a better pattern of not, making this sort of kitchen sink test component at the top that's going to satisfy the use cases of every single test in the whole file, but be a little more targeted, a little more direct about it. But I'm not there today for just this one new test we're writing. Okay, cool. So we should still have a red test that we can now go turn green. Yep. In the production code in a real hacky way and then try and make it nice. So I do remember doing this, like I said earlier today, in like a copy paste tweak scenario where I wasn't ready to actually work on the library. What did I do? I made a ng on changes ran, which starts at false. And then in here we can do ng on changes ran, turn it to true. And then here the problem is this get input starts with undefined will cause it to emit immediately as soon as you subscribe. We don't want it to do that unless ng on change is already ran. Then it's going to give us the behavior where, the first time you subscribe, if it already has a value, you get it. If not, it's going to wait until that, Angular finishes initializing your component, basically, because otherwise it's going to fire with undefined before Angular has even given you the value of that input. And so we can just do like this dot. And if it ran, go ahead and start with that. Otherwise, just kind of do nothing. And this will just be a hack. Well, I'll think about a better way to do this in a minute, but hopefully that's going to turn our test green and keep all the other tests green. Always very important. Okay. In skimming my list of tests here, I should have one that it emits like after ng changes ran once, it does emit right away. So I should make another test for that. Also, or maybe we should extend. Maybe we should extend this. It emits immediately only if ng changes already ran. So then we could test that by coming into our component and, oops, wrong one, our component, and doing a lifecycle hook like ng after view init, or one of these ones that runs later. And there we'll subscribe again. And there if it oh yeah, it's the same thing, right? If it's, oh no, if it, no. We need something to cause an error if this does not, if it doesn't even run this code. Okay, so we have to be trickier about that. If you subscribe and it just doesn't emit. So we could set some variable and then inspect that variable in the test after init to show that, right? Like, so if we had, I don't know if this is going to work right away, but let's just say we have something here like ran after emitted immediately after ng on changes, right? So we want to match. I like to match the test description and keep the same language everywhere. And then here we would do emitted immediately is true. Oh, and this is going to tell me I need to implement after view init. And here we can do something like expect. Let's right, okay, yeah, okay, this will be great. Let me show you exactly why red-green refactor is nice. So so this is just commented out. So this is just like we hadn't touched the production code yet. Oh, well, now it's like we hadn't touched the production code yet. Expect, oh, I lost my, all right, let's come back to that in a minute. So ctx2 dot run. Here we put our actual test code. We're going to expect 2 dot grab our fixture and the component instance dot emitted immediately after on ng on changes. Oh, which means this needs to be a test component 2. So now it knows that that's the kind of thing that is to be true. And as long as we're doing it that way, maybe we can come back and set up. See, yeah, this is why red-green refactor is great. So I would have expected this to pass already. I would have expected this to cause it to emit immediately, no matter when, certainly after ng-on changes. And I think I know the problem. There's a caveat with Angular tests if you're doing an actual component test where it's not going to run ng-on changes basically for the root component of your test, which is unfortunate in my opinion. But in an Angular GitHub issue I've read before, the reasoning they gave was something like the Angular framework will call this for you when it sets an input for a component, and the Angular framework does not set this. What am I trying to say? It does not set the inputs of the root component of your test. You do that yourself. And so if you're going to be, and so the Angular testing framework says, look, you're setting those inputs. You're going to have to call ng-on changes if that's what you want that to do. And that's just too bad, because then if you want it to really reflect reality, reflect real production behavior, you're going to have to figure out how to construct one of these exactly the same way the Angular framework does, and that just doesn't make sense to me. So the alternative is, well, just wrap your component that you're testing in some outer one, so that this is no longer the root component. And then if you cause it to update that value, the Angular framework will start managing it for you and call this with all the right production values. So that's the way I've gone before, and I feel like I should make a wrapper for this. But then that makes me feel like, I've done this enough times, I feel like I should have a ready-made helper that just you can very easily wrap any component. So let's do it the long way first, and then come back to that. Maybe we can add that as a new feature and see if we get to that today. So let's do another component and the template. Okay, so now we're going to need a selector here, app test2 to match the name. And then the template for this is going to be app test2. So we made ourselves a wrapper, or we're about to. Wrapper component, and we don't actually need it to do anything, I don't think. I don't even think we need, we need this input. We could just make it. Okay. I'm trying to think of a way to not have to pass in an actual input value there, because this is already out of hand. This is way too much test setup code, but as much as possible, I want to keep my test setup code as slim, as slim as possible. So there's no extra, someone reading this test later, or you watching me has less to process and wade through, and nothing unrelated, so that all the lines you're reading are actually significant to understand what the test is doing and to achieve the purpose of the test. And having to pass in an input value is just one extra step that I think we should be able to avoid. Oh, you know what? We wouldn't really even need this to be a component. We could make this like a directive. That removes even more. Removes even more extra stuff you don't need to care about, like this template. And the selector, we'll make an attribute selector just called app test. That would match the normal Angular like community standard for how to name things. The name of the directive is there after the prefix. We have an optional input just so that we can call getInput with a value. We won't need to actually pass anything on into it. So we have ng-on changes ran is false. I'm having ideas. I'm just going to start typing them out. ng-on changes. We're going to have to call super.ng-on changes. Oh, what is this called? Just changes usually. And let's pass that up. We'll have to now implement that on changes. ng on changes, sorry. Oh, no, that was right, that was right. The ng goes here, but not here. And we're going to say ng on changes ran is true. And let's put this after the call to the superclass. So the superclass one ran. That makes sense. And then we can use this hook instead of this one to do the other part, which is, let's see, emitted before on changes, emitted after on changes, okay, so then here, rather than throwing an error, let's, and we don't care about the value, let's do emitted before on changes equals this dot on changes ran, right? Oh, if it didn't run, right? If it's before if it didn't run. And let's make sure we only run this once, so we don't, it's only the very first emit. And then we'll do basically the same thing again. And I suppose we can get rid of this to make it even easier for future readers. We just do pipe take one dot subscribe. And then we can do it again below here, but this time it's the after case, and that's if it did run. It emitted after if it did run. And to satisfy our linting, what's this one complaining about? Yes, we will need to worry about that. Okay, so now the wrapper component, good. This is now a wrapper component, and that was the whole point of doing that. So we could wrap it and get change detection to actually be called by the Angular framework rather than us manually calling it. Like if we manually call ng-on changes ourselves, then of course we can set it up to be timed right in our test, but that's not going to tell us if it's going to work correctly when it's actually controlled by Angular in a production situation. So that's why we're switching to the wrapper. And then we're going to need this guy to have knowledge of declarations of the test directive. So that we can actually use it here. Sorry. Oh, right. So this is just going to be like any old div, we don't care, and we have to activate it with our app test. That's how we use it. Great. So now in our test, we're going to expect, after everything is initialized, that, well, first of all, we need to get a hold of our inner component. So test component equals 2 dot fixture dot. How do you select an inner component from these debug helper things? I want to say it's debug element dot query. Yeah, query, and then I'm going to just try and look this up. Angular test debug element find query inner component. Query by component, that sounds about right. Query selector, no, that's not what I want. By directive, that's what I want. So when I'm going to do fixture, okay, so that's what I wanted, and that's what I wanted. Debug element dot query by directive. By dot directive test test directive. This is the test directive. Okay. So then we're going to expect test directive dot and how do we get the right typing on this guy? It's just a debug element. Oh, it's a debug element. So then to get the actual directive from that, how do I component instance? It's not a component, it's a directive. I wonder if we can do it as a directive. Gosh. Let's just see what that even does. Let's just run our one test. Cannot read. Yeah. Can I click this? No. When did that break? That makes navigating to my code way worse. Let's do a quick search for that. Karma. Now let's do Angular. Yeah, Karma. Click on stack trace. That's not going to turn up what I want. I don't think. Oh, I switched. I'm trying out this GitHub dark mode, and it startles me every time I see it. No, that's just missing source maps. Anyway, I know what's going on. I was just lamenting the fact that in the future I'm not going to know what's going on. So this is not finding anything. So maybe this says by directive. Let's just go see if it's being constructed properly. So that would be in what spec? Directive superclass spec. Directive superclass spec, line 200-ish. Let's first of all see if this is even being constructed. No. Well, that's a problem. Oh, any Jaho, you promised me you would help me pronounce your name next time I saw you. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining. Um, I'm gonna keep my eye on the chat and learn how to pronounce your name. I hope. Welcome back. Huh. Uh-oh. I don't know what I said. I pronounced it correctly, but I don't remember what I said. Um, any any uh any Ajaho? Any Ajaho? That is that right? Any Ajaho? Call you Enya for short, or Jaho, Jojo. Um, Enya. Okay, Enya. It is. Thanks. I'm glad you found me. I changed my Twitch name um, because this is the name I use in like YouTube and GitHub, and I wanted it to be consistent. And of course, like as soon as I changed it, I went and joined someone's Twitch stream and wrote a comment to them, and they're like, Simont? Simon? You must be Simon. I'll call you Simon." I was like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. People won't know what to call me." Oh yeah, yeah, and it kept my subscribers. Um, yeah, cool. Thanks. Glad you're here. Anyway, I can't change my name again for another. I think it's like 6 months or something like that, or 6 weeks, six something. And so in 6 months, I can decide if I want to rename again to something people will know how to like identify me. Because my name is not Simon. My last name is Simonton. Anyway. What are we doing? We're trying to figure out why the heck the test directive is not even being created during this test. We've got a wrapper component that should have it from there because we are declaring that the test directive is a thing. Like if I just rename this, I thought it would complain if I tried to put like some meaningless some meaningless attribute on there. No, it doesn't complain about that. So that's too bad. Well, we can go back to it being a component and just make our lives easier. So let's just make this a component. We'll make this a component. And then the only change we'll have to make is giving it a template. And let's just see if that's enough. Do I still have my breakpoint? Yeah. It's still not creating it. Let's give it an actual template and see if it's rendering. In case, I don't know, for some reason my breakpoint is not working even though the component is working. Yeah, there's nothing on the screen. What if we put something here? Is anything rendering anywhere? No. Well, if the outer component is not rendering, then certainly the inner one won't. What? Oh. I wonder if I'm running into issues. Oh, you know what? Oh my gosh, Karma is not rebuilding. Because I had that error. Oh, killing me, Karma. I wish it would print the error there instead of just running the code from before I made the error and not even telling me. Okay, we have the outer wrapper at least. That's something. We still don't have the inner thing. test component is there. It should pick it up from that, but let's, as long as we're making this a component, let's make it like look like a standard component. Oops. Still no inner component rendering. What? This was not supposed to be the hard part. App test. Is there something going on here? No, we don't have. App test is not like overloaded or anything. This is the only place it appears. Why does it render this, but then not turn this into the actual inner component? At a loss here. Let's put our, yeah, we already have our breakpoint there. So we would know immediately if it was actually even constructing one of those. I assume. Let's put one. Oh, there isn't a constructor there to put one on. That's fine. Well, what other debugging skills and tips and tricks can we come up with? Any, you're not a Angular dev who can just tell me what's wrong right now? You just solve all my problems for me? Oh, why is the red underline there? Sure, that's just guys. Yeah, that's just a TS-lint thing for this one. What about this one? And that's again TS-lint. It's just a linter. Oh, good, cool. Nice to have another Angular person with me. So I could certainly fix that there and here. Then I could fix this by just giving it a different name. And then at least we feel more comfortable that there's no red underlines. Let me just restart Karma, first of all. That shouldn't be an issue this time because we were picking up changes from this file. But I don't know. I'm pushing buttons to make it feel like I'm doing something. Yup, and then we have only the outer wrapper. What's going on? What have we done up here? I did an inner outer thing up here, didn't I? Like this is the outer thing and this is the inner thing. And the outer thing in the template uses the inner thing, S color text. And then in the context, oh, I put the test component. I put the outer and the inner in the declarations. But we just saw that we're getting the outer one, so that shouldn't be the issue. But just for the sake of eliminating variables between the two situations, let's go ahead and do that. So in the context, I can say we're declaring the outer thing and the inner thing, or vice versa. Still no inner. That did do it. it was not declaring this. That's exciting that we can have a lead now to fix it, but that's not as exciting enough. Why would the outer wrapper render? And then if I add the outer wrapper, the inner component starts rendering? What? Let me open up this component context and see what it does with this. It must be that if you don't include it in the module metadata, then when you pass it to, where is it? Create component, it somehow it doesn't know all the things that it should be connected to. I'm a little unhappy with the Angular framework there too, that you could get that behavior. Like, it should, if you need to have declared this already before this fully functions, then they should give you an error here and tell you, hey, you didn't declare that, you better declare that, or else you might end up with problems, instead of just saying nothing and then I just ended up with problems and had to figure all that out on my own. Anyway, complaining doesn't actually help. I apologize. So now I'm with you, Enya. Hooray! Figured it out. We know exactly what's going on. We fixed it, and our test turned green, but we have no expectations, of course. That was the constructor. Nice. That was the test. So now let's go ahead and look at our things here. We want to expect test directive dot. Oh, and we need typing to know what this thing is. Right now it's an any. What does this return? Predicate of debug element. Is debug element? Do I have to just like I can put here that this is a test component too. Oh, gotta get a better name. But is there some place like even earlier in the chain that I can declare the type? Like, does debug element, is that generic? No. So it looks like this is actually the best I can do, because that's just an any. I can't do any better. If Angular's typing itself just has any there, I can't do any better than that. I can't make, like, they would have to make that better. We changed it to a component yQuery as a directive. Components are directives. Components are a special like subtype of directive, and so like there is no by component. There's just by directive, and that covers both components and directives. So because there's no other way that I know of, unless you do, is there a different function I could call that would look closer to it? Although, yeah, you're right, we changed it to a component, but that was trying to troubleshoot something that maybe we didn't have to. I'm just curious now. I want to see if I go back to a directive, now that I'm declaring the outer one, can I do this? Oh, and I'm going to have to make this. Yeah, I'll do an attribute directive. So let's test. And let's just do that. Let's see, expect test directive like to be defined. And let's just see if that does anything. And if it does, yeah, I like that better. I like that better because it allowed us to remove at least a little bit of the test code. Not much, but at least a little bit. So let's go ahead and rename this. And I think we're back to a good state now. Test directive. Yeah, at least I don't have that number 2 anymore. Well, except for right there. All right. So now let's get to a failing test to actually like test the production side of things. So now we're going to expect this dot. Now we have our typing because we just had to declare it there. So we want emitted before on changes to be false and after to be true. And we'll expect this to, right now we'll expect true for both of them because of, that's the sort of bug or like improvement we're trying to make. Expected undefined to be false and expected undefined to be true. Oh. Undefined. How could that possibly be undefined? It starts as false and it changes to a Boolean. Well, that's interesting. So we should be setting it to false there. And then, I wonder if this thing is not actually my test directive. We're getting the wrapper component. I'm going to change it right back to a component instead of a directive, aren't I? Does this work? Do you know? Can you just query by dot directive to get a directive? Like it's named by directive. Shouldn't I be able to select a directive with it? Get reference to a directive used in a component. Oh look, something I've seen and upvoted before. But this isn't in a test. This is, yeah, like view children and stuff. Ooh, I downvoted something. Wow. I don't do that very often. Let's just look at the Angular docs for by directive. By? What? There it is. By. I type by and I don't get by, but I type directive and I have a link to by. Okay. Matches nodes that have the given directive present. It matches a node that has the given directive present. Oh, a debug node. Okay. And the component, right. So the component obviously is the wrapper component. I need something else here. Dot. Well, let's not do dot anything. Let's just do that and see what's available on this thing. Oh my gosh, I'll get there eventually. I feel like, first of all, I feel like I'm going to end up turning it back to a component by the time we're done. But I'm going to try. I'm going to try. Oh, it's not giving me a list of, maybe down here it'll give me a list of functions I can call. So if we do like not provider tokens. References, what is that? References, is that a function? No. Okay, that didn't give us anything. What is this, a debug element? Debug element. Child nodes. Children. Maybe it has a child for the directive? Or is this only going to give me like DOM elements? In which case I would need to get all the directives on that DOM element. Angular test get directive instance. Testing attribute directives. Yeah, that seems like that should tell me. Yeah, by.directive. Here it gets all elements with an attached directive. .injector.get the directive. Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, I'm learning. So that's going to be .injector.get test directive. Then I don't have to declare my type anymore. That's cool enough. I will leave my breakpoint there. Hey! That did it. So now we should be able to do this, and now we're going to expect this one to fail, but it's going to, instead of saying expected undefined to be false, it should be expected true to be false. Yeah. And expected false to be true. They were both wrong? Why would they both be wrong? They all start out false. So this turns true. And then by the time this runs, oh, well, I know that this should be true. That's kind of a funny way to write that now that I look at it again later. Like this should just basically be true. And I don't even, I need that. Sorry, I'm just thinking about the test case I'm working on here. I'm going to change this to when it was called. It means only after NGN changes is called. That's really the timing I want. It could emit during NGN changes, and that's okay. In fact, it will in our case. And then instead of all these variables, I can just make one that says, oh no, I'm still going to need two of them, but we can make one called like stage, and it starts at before ng on changes. And we could change the stage here. And then emitted during, that's going to be undefined. And then here we say emitted during which stage. So then emitted during should be after ng on changes. Uh-oh. Oh, because I changed the name. That'll be enough to be unique. Expected before to be after. Okay, so then yeah, we covered that already. If we like comment this out, we're still not going to get a passing test because now it's going to be undefined. Oh. It's not undefined. It still says before. Oh, I've got an error again. Or maybe actually it'll pass, but hopefully another test will fail. Oh no, it's undefined. Okay, good. So it's undefined because I'm really curious. Now I feel like this isn't going to turn it green. But I feel like it is going to give me the behavior I want, so my test is somehow wrong. Let me restart Karma again. When Karma has an error and you're working with multiple files, sometimes it gets out of sync and you have to just restart Karma, which is uncool. That wasn't the problem this time. So ng-on, so this is just never emitting. Why would that be? Oh, I made a trickier test case than I even realized. Oh wow, I'm really happy that worked because, or that, I don't know, that we're having the error now. Okay, theory. When ng-on changes is called, it emits an okay. It emits the list of keys that changed. And I think because we're not setting a value for this input, that's not even included. Let's verify that first of all. I think the way Angular works, let's find out. Is Angular going to include a key for this input if we did not specify it? Right, like here in our wrapper component, we did not say my input equals anything. Right. So let's set a breakpoint. We need to set a breakpoint here, I think. Directive superclass. Where it calls this guy. And we'll see what's in this changes. Oh, I guess we could have intercepted that from our test code as well. But anyway, whoop. Oh, it just doesn't call ng-on changes. Okay. Uh-huh. Well, that was the whole point of making this like inner wrapper thing, because I thought that Angular was going to take care of that for us now. What if we give it, just for an experiment, let's give it, oh, this is a string, so we don't want the brackets, and we'll just give it a value. Then does it call ng on changes? Wow, this I never knew. If you don't give it any inputs, it just doesn't even call ng on changes? Well, that's new information and makes me have to think harder about how to implement this feature. Yeah, then everything's great. Oh, wow. Wow. So that's a little tidbit about Angular lifecycle hooks that I still hadn't ever picked up on. So let's take a look at all the lifecycle hooks and see if there's another way we can. Because what I want is if you call getInput and the input truly is undefined, that it's going to immediately emit undefined. But if you subscribe from the constructor, it's going to wait until all the initialization is done and then emit undefined. Yeah, that optimization, I mean, I get it. Don't call it if there are no changes. But, I mean, that's just not the behavior I want for this test helper. So we have to figure another way to do it. Okay, lifecycle hooks. Where do I find those guys? Hooking into the component lifecycle. That sounds about right. Show me a list of them, please. Okay. So ng on changes is the very first thing, and then ng on init. So we could delay all of this get input observable could always be delayed till here. We could put some sort of trigger for it here. So that when you call get input, it's going to have some ng on changes or ng on init, which means making a new lifecycle hook here, which means almost a breaking change in the API, because then if anyone has their own subclass with an ng on init, we're going to then require them to call super.ng on init. Oh, on timing of ng on changes, it says what you just discovered. Respond when Angular sets or resets. The method receives simple changes. Note this happens so any operation you perform impacts. Oh, maybe I didn't understand. On the docs. On the docs of, like, if I go look at which docs? This one? No. Oh, and the timing. Right. In the timing. The column called timing, like you said in your comment. Called before ng on init and whenever one or more. Called before this and whenever one or more data-bound input properties change. I guess that's as far as I've ever read before, or that I remembered reading. Note that if your component has no inputs, or you use it without providing any inputs, the framework will not call ng on changes. Exactly the problem we just painfully had to discover on our own. So what can we do? What can we do? I feel like we're between a rock and a hard place. Because if we override any more of these, then it's a breaking change in the API, because then we're going to expect subclasses to call it. You know, I could override ng on init and somehow set up some trigger there, but if there's still going to be the weird case where someone can break it by not calling super.ng on init. which would be fine if it said that in the docs from the start, but maybe they already wrote their component that way. And then just by upgrading to a new version of the library, it no longer works right. So I almost feel like right now, I can follow the angular semantics of ng on changes, right? But then that basically means that it was already working right. Here where I was saying, oh, fire's too early. Right, so the change I made before where it's like a behavior subject, so when you describe it immediately gives you the resulting value. Works like a behavior subject. Right, do I want to make it work like a behavior subject of what ng on change is called? What I really wish it could do is work like a behavior subject of the current value. You don't care what life cycle hooks were called or who passed the value in or didn't pass the value in. I just want to, if I call get input dollar, I just want an observable of whatever the value is. I mean, really, so I guess what I'm saying is the behavior I want is going to require me to override this. And I'm going to have to make documentation saying, warning, warning. Make sure you call the superclass ng on init thing. In my release notes for this, I could say, because there's no breaking change yet, they're just not going to get the benefit of this new behavior I'm adding until they call ng on init. So I could call that out in the change log somehow. I think that's the best. I think that's my best option. Okay, so before I just go actually writing all of that, we've got to make sure that we have all the test code in place for it. So we turned the test green that we were working on all along. So that's awesome. So there's some trickiness now that we still have to cover, I think, with more edge cases, more tests, right? Because right now, right. We don't have it working. We have it working only if we do this. And so we just need it to work when we do this, and then call that out. Maybe I'll leave it like this. I don't want to test too many things in just this one place. So let's make a separate test now that's going to fail, but we could write an easier one for that, I think. For this new behavior we just discovered that's going to require us to, let's see, so it emits even if, how was that phrased? Even if, thanks for pointing that out to me, by the way. That's awesome. Even if no inputs are provided to the component. It emits even if no inputs are provided to the component. That little beep, I don't know if you heard that. I've got a CO2 monitor. The cord's not quite long enough. Because I have read that CO2, you use up all the oxygen in your room, and it's not unsafe. It's not unhealthy. You can have a really high concentration of CO2 and still be fine. It has to get up sky high. like in some sort of industrial process kind of setting. But it's not too hard to get it high enough that you start to be affected cognitively. Um, and so when I realized that, heard about that, read about that, I was like, well, I sit around thinking all day. That's my job. So if I need my cognition intact and running 100%, so I've got the CO2 monitor, and I had my door closed because there was some noise out there, and did a little bit too much breathing in here. So this should exchange the air with the rest of my apartment and make it better in here. Stop beeping. Um, I'm going to unplug that in a second. It emits even if no inputs are provided to the component. So yeah, maybe we can use our exact same setup. Let me just do this. I'm going to maybe do some more refactoring in a minute, but for now, let me just do that much, and then just do this much. No, 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 no. We can't have that there. We can't have that. So we're going to need at least this much to stay in here. And here. But this time, we won't add that input. And then we'll expect this to sure. All we're really testing is for it not to be undefined. To be defined. Yeah, I'm talking myself out of this whole thing. Maybe I want to put this back, and so then I can simplify this one as I go. Right, because now I don't need stages. All I need to know is if it emitted. Emitted is false. I don't need an input at all. Right? Emitted is true. We don't care about the take one anymore. Oh, we do need the input so that we can call get input. Okay. Fair enough. But we don't need the take one. We don't need ng on changes. And we're going to want this to be true. And now we should have a failing test of a different ilk. Oh, which means we're going to have to run the different test. It's still beeping. Sorry. I got in the zone, and you were probably more distracted by it than me. It did drop down below the alarm threshold finally. But it's still pretty high. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to go open a window a bit more so that I can stay sharp for you while I'm streaming. And I'll take this opportunity to switch to standing desk mode. I've said this in at least one stream before, but I highly recommend a standing desk if you're on the fence. I've had back trouble for most of my adult life, on and off, and it really does help. Okay, we have a failing test. Great. So now we have a whole new problem that I didn't even know existed that we turned up during debugging, during trying to write a test that writing this other feature. Right, so in the change log of the docs, let me leave this as a to-do. I'm going to I'm going to finish up and polish up this change because now that I understand all the problems, it's really two completely separate issues that I'm fixing. One is that the thing will emit if you don't pass in a. It's not unrelated. It's not unrelated. That it will emit if you don't pass in, if you don't use an input. Right, we created this new problem. Okay, let me show you. Let's get back to what this used to be in production before I started making changes to this new to implement this new feature. Now I only have one failing test. It's a different failing test. The new one I just wrote, the one called emits even if no inputs are provided, that passed. Here, let's go look at our spec list. Emits. Uh-oh. Oh. Stupid karma. Tell me when there's a compilation error. Okay, I expect to see one failure. And the failure is still in the same one? Oh my gosh. Just do that to make sure. I'm expecting this one to fail now because, that was the whole point. This test was supposed to fail if it had this problem. So if that passes now, there we go. I had to restart Karma. Karma! Okay. So now this one passes, the most recent one I wrote, because it did emit, even if it emitted as soon as you switch to just. Yeah. I've got a thing for following. First of all, I hate build chains. I want nothing to do with my build chain. And so when the Angular CLI comes pre-configured to run Karma, I'm going to do whatever you set up for me, buddy, because I don't want to set anything up on my own. So that's really the only reason I haven't looked into Jest. This is a newer problem in Karma. I don't know when this came up. It hasn't always been like this. Yeah, and yeah, thanks. I started with Angular 1. Was it you who's been an Angular dev for quite a while? I forget. Someone was chatting with me in a previous stream. I started with Angular 1, and it was like there was no CLI. It was like Felipe Silva had some repository that. No, I think I started with John Papa, had some like seed repository that used Gulp or Grunt. I forget which is which. Oh my gosh, what a nightmare. And then Webpack came along, and then it was like better, but it's still like got to set up all this weird Webpack config. So then the CLI came along and said, you don't even get to see the Webpack config. That's my favorite. If I can't even see it, it's not even possible for me to configure it. That's my jam. It's like, and that's how I feel about servers too. Like, I would, if I could, I would run apps, every app I ever wrote on like Cloud Functions or AWS Lambda, where there's no server. Like, I'm going to give you my code. And when someone asks for you to run my code, please run my code. If you want to use a server behind the scenes, that's your business. I don't care if you use a server or not. Don't tell me about that. That's not my problem. You just run my code. that's that's how I feel about build chains too. Look, I'm going to give you my code and you run it for me and let me see it run. I don't want to set anything up. Okay. That's how things should work, right? I mean, sure, some people are into that and they can go be DevOps people and make this, we can all build on top of each other, right? Someone makes the hardware, someone makes the operating system, someone else can make the, back end as a service, cloud infrastructure, and the build chains, and I'll write my code here. And I'm sort of, I'm doing an open source library, so I'm sort of in the middle, and then you can write your application on top of that. Um, so I was trying to think through, I was thinking I could do this as two totally separate features and commits. But now, after starting to talk that through, we realize that no, actually they are related. This fix caused the need for this guy, which means that this is a breaking change, that if I switch things up like I've got it written now, and someone has overridden ng on init, get input will stop working for them. Today it will emit undefined, and then once they upgrade, without calling this, it will stop emitting undefined. It just won't emit at all. I just had a sneaky thought. Oh my. What if... I kind of hate myself for this, but I might stick with it. What if we switch to this? Go ahead and import that. We're just trying to be quick and dirty. Sorry. Right. Instead of this, yeah. Instead of that solution, what if our solution is to, whoa, hold on, caps lock. Delay this on the microtask queue. And I'm going to use my, which means I wouldn't need this at all. Oops. And that's just going to, because the constructor and ng on changes are called during the same event loop, JavaScript, the macro task, during the same macro task. And so this is just going to delay that very first, so you can call it in the constructor, but it's not actually going to run until, I think, we'll test this after ng on changes. I kind of hate those kind of hacks. Ooh, nope, that did not fix it. Oh, I thought that might do it. That's probably better. Let me just make sure Karma's not playing tricks on us again. Gosh. Oh. Right. That didn't do it. Standing mode didn't last very long, did it? You know what? Let me. I need a quick break. I need a quick break. I'm gonna leave maybe this up in case anyone wants to stare at this and tell me how to solve all my problems when I get back. And but I'm gonna be back in like 5 minutes. Thanks. Ooh, where do I find that? There it is. All right, I'm back. Uh, ha! Feeling refreshed. Thanks for hanging in there. Um, let's see here. So we were just trying out this new idea, delay on microtask queue, thinking that that would, if you subscribe in the constructor, that would sort of pause, put it up in the microtask, leaving time for ng-on changes to execute, and for basically for Angular to set that to set the value of that input, and then finally emit after that. That's the whole point. That's the whole goal. And if that works, it would be without having to override any new lifecycle hooks that would cause breaking changes in the library. And we gave it a try. I think I just restarted Karma, and it still failed. So, just for good measure, I feel like the theory is solid, even if hacky. Oh, what is this? Oh, too many. Typing got confused. And this obviously is not the way I would leave it, guessing how many turns of the microtask queue we would need to wait before ng-on changes is done. But that's still not working. That surprises me. I mean, we should certainly be able to queue it up like in the macro task queue. If we did like just an actual delay from RxJS. Delay, what do you put a number here? Yeah, for 0 milliseconds. So it should queue it up with basically a set timeout 0. Would that solve our test, fix our test? Oh, whoa, whoa. Right, because we're in the fake async zone. If we do that, if we're in the fake async zone, we are going to have to run. Let's focus on just our one test. I feel like I want to experiment a bit. And not be constrained to solutions I would actually ever deploy. Just to brainstorm, basically like a brainstorming process. It emits immediately only if. So that's this one. So then if we just did like a ctx.tick0 to make sure we flushed all those timeouts, would that fix it for us? Cannot read property detail. Oh, ctx2. This is why I can't be. That's why I still have to refactor the test itself. Still. Well, that's surprising. Oh, because I have to do the delay after the start with. See, this is why now we can, if this works, then I think maybe we'll be able to switch back to just the microtask queue. And that's great because then you don't have to do all this like flushing timeouts with the fake async zone. I mean, you still have to flush microtasks, but if we're in the middle of change detection, we are already going to have to be doing that anyway. How's that for some grammar? Delay on microtask queue. Oh wait, is Karma gonna? Of course, Karma's gonna work even though it didn't update to the new code. Hey! And this might satisfy everything now. Oh, no, it certainly did not. That's interesting. What did it? Emits undefined for unspecified inputs is a. Oh, right. I need to get the link to the issue I'm solving here for this, so for future reference. Get input unspecified. Ah, so I'm not subscribing within any actual code that's running within the Angular framework. I'm doing it right here in the test itself. So if I do this, I am going to have to flush microtasks manually here. How do I feel about that? Users, this is technically a change that it would be observable to the end user. I mean, I could do my same little trick. I could combine the two solutions and only delay it on the microtask queue if ng on changes has already run. And that actually could be significant, because what I've done here, every single get input anyone ever makes, even later in their code now, is not going to run like if someone, did something pretty similar to this, like in their code, they for some reason wanted to subscribe to observable, get the value into a variable here, and then use that variable after. I don't know why, but let's just say they did. That's technically a breaking change for them. So I could say this dot ng on changes ran, sort of do a no opy type thing. Otherwise, put in a delay only in that case if it did not yet run. And then I'm only affecting the behavior for the case that I'm actually trying to, for the cases where it's currently firing too early. Exactly what this GitHub issue is narrowing in on. Okay, yeah, and we did write our new test here. That it emits even if no inputs are provided to the component, which is great. And now, is there a fancier way to accomplish this same thing? I guess, actually, to tell you the truth, we did end up with a weird case where there's a breaking change. And that is if the user has a directive that doesn't take any inputs, or where the user doesn't actually provide any inputs. So ng on changes literally never runs for the entire life cycle of the component, maybe for the entire app. Then they're going to get this delay every time. I guess what's running through my mind right now is this really worth calling a breaking change, or can I sneak this in without bumping a major version of the library? Because I'm not going to do that until Angular 12. Right? That's just a rule I have for my libraries so that it's easy to understand which version of my library you should install. It's if you're still on Angular 10, you go install version 10 of my library. And it also insulates you from breaking changes the same way Angular does. You're only going to get breaking changes twice a year. And other Angular libraries do the same thing. They keep their version numbers in sync. And I've appreciated that as users of those libraries, like NGRX, the whole suite of NGRX, um, the store and the effects and all those, the Redux, like the Angular Redux clone. Um, it's such an obscure change, and it's fixing a real problem, and maybe introducing a timing issue for users. If they're truly writing reactive code, I would not expect it to affect them in any way. It's when you're sort of writing reactive code, but then also like doing strange things that depend on the exact timing. I feel like that's like an anti-pattern or a bad practice. And if someone is using this get input, they're wanting to be more, write more reactive code instead of just using the ng on changes callback themselves. And certainly, like if I was writing this from scratch, I would not be doing all this craziness. This would be like accumulating cruft, almost tech debt or design debt, almost like accumulating design debt. If I release it this way and then keep that forever. If I release it this way and then keep that forever. I think nicer. I think I'm just going to go for it. I think this should work for, not be a breaking change for 99 point whatever percent. Well, let's see. How many people are actually using this? I know I am. And that's no one from the outside world ever like opens issues or anything. So, yeah, let's let's just go for it. I'll still cover it in the release notes, but I'm going to go for it. And that means that in these tests, um, I need to think about the way I wrote these two tests. So emits the value of an input when it changes, emits. That was this one. Oh, emits the value, this one, sorry. No, that makes more sense. And we expected it to have been called once. It was called 0 times. Let's run just these tests so we can find the stack traces in the console a bit more easily. So emits undefined for unspecified inputs is this one, and is coming from line 238. Wait. Oh, sorry, 184. Emits undefined for unspecified inputs. And the trouble here really is, I'm doing exactly what I said someone trying to actually write reactive code didn't do. They're calling it and expecting the timing of this to be so perfect. Like I could put, flush microtasks here, and that would fix the test. Or I could also take this as an opportunity to write the test in a way that I would expect users to actually be using it. Like what I'm saying by adding this line of code is I don't actually care whether you can do this. I'm not supporting that use case. I'm supporting the use case of like some real Angular code, like all this stuff. So what do I do? Do I make something fancy like this again for like all of these tests? Like, do I come in here, do this as CTX2, start tweaking this and having the directive give me the values that I'm... It emits undefined for unspecified inputs. So what do I want to see? I want to see just basically what it emitted. The emitted value. Emitted value. I don't care about the take one. Don't care about ng on changes. And then here I say I need something more like this, where the expectation is that emitted value is undefined. But if I do that, then I'm going to have to make sure like it's already undefined even if none of that runs. So I'm going to have to do the emitted value is like what's a better string there? Emitted value is initial value, and I want it to be undefined to prove that it not only, yeah, so it changed it. It actually emitted undefined. And then let's see if that makes that test pass. Yeah. And gosh, I'm just making these tests really complex though to read and understand. Like this part is clear enough. Emitted value is undefined. Yeah. But you have to have read so much before you get to that point. You have to understand so much. Oh, for unspecified inputs. Wait a minute. Emits undefined. Oh, of course. Sorry. I'm sorry. Let me run just this one test so I don't confuse myself again. That was still failing. Because I specified the input. I said it was value. So if we don't specify the input, we should see that it emits undefined. There we go. Oh, now we had some tests set up before that we could leverage. We have this unspecified input. So I guess, honestly, I still like it better like this. I would rather start removing things from here, because that's even worse to have to understand this whole mess to be able to then understand just this one test. At least this is a little more targeted. And then we still have, what, one more failing test? Emits the value of an input when it changes. It emits the value of an input when it changes. Line Oh, we've got two failures on here. Called once, it was called 0 times. 162. Right, it's the same thing again. We can't just subscribe. Because that's not a realistic thing to do, to reach into a component, grab its internal get input from the outside world, and then subscribe to it, right? I suppose the theory here is that you're writing this code as if you were inside the component. It emits the value of an input when it changes. So, I mean, let's just stick with our pattern here. Let's just completely rewrite this test. We have the emitted value, we have the input, we're setting it. So all we have to do, so we expect, now we need a way to change that on the fly as we, and how were we doing that before? How were we ever changing that value? We were clicking a button. We had this whole component set up so that when you click a button in the app, it emits a new value. And you had to understand all of that just to understand this one test. I mean, I feel like there's pros and cons, but I'm on a roll going this direction. So, how do we set this up in a more isolated way, just in this test, to be emitting new values? Honestly, I see why I did the whole button clicking thing before. Like, I could manually set an input, set a variable on the wrapper component and pass that in, right? I could do like outer value was initial, and I could bind that. My input equals outer value. And then in my test, I could do something like, I could get a hold of the wrapper component and say wrapper component dot outer value is value 4. But then I'm going to have to call, ctx2 dot detect changes or tick or whatever. I'm going to have to manually trigger change detection because or call it inside the ng zone or something. Whereas if I call click, I've got like test helpers all set up to already behave like that, and it feels more like realistic. Like there's less for me to have just made a mistake in the test to accidentally make it pass, right? Like if I'm manually pulling the strings on all these details of the Angular framework, telling it when to run change detection, then I feel like I'm at a greater danger of writing an unrealistic test. And at least if I've hidden all that behind some test helpers that I use consistently throughout if I use it consistently, then at least I can feel like, okay, I put a lot of time and effort into making sure I got those test helpers right. Now I can use them freely. I could even use the CDK's component harness if I really want to use a library that I know has put a lot of thought into pulling all the right strings of the framework at all the right times. I mean, it's written by not the Angular core team, but it's the Angular material team. Is there such thing as a... I wonder if I have a nice way to just grab a component harness and do a click with that. Maybe I should leave that for another day and just stick with what I'm already doing elsewhere in this file for now. And leave that as a separate refactor later to switch from these. Because I wrote, did you see in the code I had before, like here I've got a click helper that dispatches the click event and then flushes microtasks, right? Like I'm pulling all the strings of the framework, but in a centralized place where I know that previously I've put a lot of thought into the timing of it all. And now this way I wrote all this stuff before the CDK existed, before the CDK came out with component harnesses, which is now how I would want to do all this kind of stuff. Instead of writing all this myself, I mean, use the Angular team who already did all this kind of stuff for me, obviously. Okay, so I've talked myself into going back to using something like what I had written before with clicking on buttons. And so the problem is now I just have this subscribe in the test code rather than, is there something that subscribes already? Bind to instance. Get input. We're already calling it in this test code. Oh, I need to put that back too. Oh no, that was for a different test. So I could technically look at what's going on here with this color and show that, you know, the input is getting all the right new values based on the end result after you get through this whole pipe, which is stored in this color string. Bind to instance just takes the result of this and saves it to this variable whenever it changes. But then I'm really divorcing the fact that I'm testing get input. How would I know? Where is it? You know, here it's obvious. Okay, obviously I'm testing get input. There's the code for it right there. Whereas if I relied on the details up here, then I'm really like tying in the way I implemented this, the details of this, to this spec way down here. You know what? Let's just call flush my ctx.tick here. And I guess that's a good enough compromise for me because I have put thought into this tick. I already know that I should be able to call tick anytime and have it be safe because that's the way the thing is designed. Not super satisfied with that, but you know, it's because I'm already not satisfied with the fact that we're calling this component method from outside the component. And so as long as I'm going to be like doing sort of things in the test that are sort of unrealistic, like I'm not simulating user clicks. Here I am, but in this first one I'm not. As long as that's the case, in this then I'm going to have to take responsibility myself for pulling all the strings of the framework. I guess I spent a lot of time debating it, and in the end, I'm a little disappointed in myself. But I'm gonna go with this kind of work. Also, almost feels like a workaround or something. So the good news is that means that we can stop thinking about this because we turned everything green. Well, we can switch to making sure there's no little outstanding to do items. Um, oh, that's interesting. Oh, this says it's still open. Okay, well, that's fine. Um, right. So in the end, we fixed our issue by adding one line. uh, 2 hours and 18 minutes later. Um, it fires too early sometimes, and so now it's firing later all the time. But for all the reasons I painfully went over earlier, we're going to leave it like that. Um, we can try to think about some way to simplify some of this, what turns out to basically be boilerplate. Like these tests have a lot of common code, and I'm not sure right off the top of my head if there's going to be a good way to reduce that. So let's compare these two. Identical, almost identical, same. These two are different. Same. One little extra thing there. So a little different from here down. All this is different. Slightly different. Okay. There are a lot of differences. That's the same. Identical. All that's identical. I have designs in my mind that I don't even know if I've written a little to-do item for yet to make some more aids in my library for these wrapper components. The problem is these inputs. So I don't know, without some more experimentation that I'm not ready to do tonight, whether I can make a nice wrapper component that will eliminate some of this boilerplate, like all of this, that, at least those little bits, but still allow me to pass in an input in a really robust way that simulates the Angular framework nicely. So I'm not seeing anything to extract out right off the top of my head. Unfortunately, which is a surprise. Oh, it'd be nice to not to have to call that a 2, test context 2, CTX2. But that's going to have to wait until someday more and more of this file stops depending on the stuff I declared way up at the top. So I've just already made that a bad situation for myself in this file. It's just some technical debt that I'm going to continue living with. Okay. So I'm okay with the test. I'm okay with the production code. That was the test. There's the production code. Oh yeah, that was just a little note to yeah. So now I'm on master, so I do have to be careful about my commit message here. I want to say this is a fix for ng core, and now this is a conventional commit. So by saying fix, my tooling, when I release this, I'm telling the tooling the only bump needed for this is a patch version. And so the tooling is going to run through all my commits since my last release and find the, if everything is just a fix, it'll only do a patch version bump. But if anything is a feature, it'll do a minor version. And if anything is a breaking change, it'll do a major version. And this is the library. This is a mono repo with a bunch of different libraries in it. And so I put that here, and the changelog will have a nice bold section for the changes in specifically ng core. And then this is the message that will be entered in the changelog. What is the message? Whatever I'm about to write. I know that it closes, what was it, 14? Yep, closes issue 14. And this is where I have to write some good notes for the users about this behavior change that I'm expecting should affect almost nobody. Maybe for that reason I should make it a feature. At least make it a minor version bump. And the feature is directive superclass.get input waits until until the input is set before emitting. It used to if before if called e.g. during the called from the constructor, from the directives constructor, it would emit undefined immediately, then emit again when the value was, then emit again during ng on changes when if the value was set. If the value was passed in from the parent component, if the input I'm just going to leave it there. And then I'll leave a warning. Double stars marked down. Depends on if you're using Slack or GitHub. Probably they all can interpret this at least. Warning. all emissions are now delayed on the microtask queue. I hope that's good enough. That shouldn't pose much of a problem, I hope, because change detection, there's lots of things that get delayed on the microtask queue during change detection. And so this is just adding one more thing, and maybe some unlucky user has written some kind of code that depends on that current behavior, but again, we discussed this at length before. Okay. I feel pretty okay about this. Let's run the full test suite before I really press, push this up to GitHub. Yep. Let's do it. And so this should now be closed. Good, because I put in the commit comment that it closes this issue. And we're good to go. Continuous integration is going to run. Let's pull that up in a different tab to remember to check into it. But we've got continuous integration running. Oh, I apparently never pushed that up before. That's a previous tag I made. But this is our commit we just made now. Do I get a little, yellow? That yellow should turn green in about 5 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes. And if you're watching me on Twitch, I'm going to keep going, but I'm going to stop. I'm going to cut the YouTube video here that I'll upload later. And is that true? Do I want to keep going? What else do we have here? Yeah, I'm going to find something small to do. But if you're watching on YouTube, thanks for sticking around, and I will leave some links in the description below for the to this library for the code we just committed. I'll leave a link to this commit, and you can check that out. This is an open source library, so right here at this URL, I'll leave a link to that. You can use it in your projects. You can catch me on Twitch. I am going to be streaming, well, depending on how soon you watch this, my plan for the near future is to be streaming on Tuesdays at 7:30 Eastern Time. And you can go to my Twitch channel. I'll leave a link to that and check the schedule and see if that's still the case by the time you watch this. And I'm gonna hang out a little longer. There might be another video uploaded. I'm not sure yet what I'll do, but if you're with me on Twitch, much love, and we are going to keep going.